Have you ever trusted someone so completely that you'd give them everything, only to discover they've been stealing from you for years? What would you do if the person you loved most in the world threw you away like garbage on your birthday? Today I'm sharing a story that will make you question everything you think you know about family loyalty. This woman's son betrayed her in the worst possible way, but what happened next will leave you speechless. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel because this story has twists you won't see coming. I want you to listen to my story before you decide who's right and who's wrong. On my 65th birthday, I thought I was going to celebrate with my family. I put on my nicest dress, did my hair, and waited by the window like a teenager waiting for prom. Instead of cake and presents, I got a one-way ticket to hell disguised as concern. But that was just the beginning. If you think betrayal only comes from strangers, wait until you hear what my own flesh and blood did to me. They say a mother's love knows no limits. I believe that with every fiber of my being. For 37 years, I lived and breathed for Ryan, my only child. Every scraped knee got my attention. Every bad dream got my comfort. Every success got my celebration. I was there when he took his first steps, spoke his first words, graduated high school, and walked down the aisle. I thought I knew him better than anyone in this world. I woke up that Tuesday morning in my small house in Toledo with butterflies in my stomach. 65 felt different somehow, like a milestone that demanded recognition. Ryan hadn't called in weeks, always busy with work, always stressed about something with his wife Lisa. But surely he'd remember today. I made coffee for 2 out of habit, set the table with my good plates, and waited. The hours crawled by like wounded animals. I checked my phone every few minutes, reread old text messages, just to see his name on my screen. By noon, the coffee had gone cold and my heart had started sinking. I tried calling him once, but it went straight to voicemail. His voice sounded so formal, so distant in that recorded message. When did my baby boy start sounding like a stranger? At 3 p.m, just when I'd given up hope, the doorbell rang. I practically ran to answer it, my heart hammering against my ribs. There he was, my Ryan, standing on my doorstep with a bouquet of carnations from the grocery store and that smile he used to give me when he'd broken something as a child. "Happy birthday, Mom," he said, giving me a quick hug that felt more like a business handshake. "Hope you're ready for a surprise." I was so grateful he'd shown up that I didn't question the stiffness in his voice or the way his eyes wouldn't quite meet mine. "You came," I whispered, holding onto his arm like he might disappear. "Of course I came. Go get your coat. I made reservations somewhere special." I didn't even ask where we were going. I was just so happy to be spending time with him. I grabbed my purse, put on the blue coat he'd given me for Christmas 3 years ago, and followed him to his car. We drove through familiar neighborhoods, past the park where I used to push him on swings, past his old elementary school. But then we turned down a road I didn't recognize, lined with tall oak trees that seemed to whisper warnings I was too excited to hear. When we pulled into the circular driveway of Sunset Manor Senior Living, my stomach dropped like a stone into dark water. The building was enormous, all brick and glass with perfectly manicured gardens that looked more like a cemetery than a home. A sign by the entrance read "Compassionate Care for Your Loved Ones." "Ryan, what is this place?" I asked, my voice small and confused. He turned off the engine and sat there for a moment, staring at the steering wheel. "Mom, we need to talk. Lisa and I have been discussing this for months. You can't keep living alone. What if something happens? What if you fall and no one finds you for days?" "But I'm fine. I take care of myself perfectly well." "Are you? Last month you called me 3 times asking where you put your car keys. You forgot our neighbor's name, the woman you've known for 15 years. And when I visited last week, you had newspapers piled up from 2 months ago." I felt like he was speaking a foreign language. Those were just little things. Everyone forgets things sometimes. "Mom, please don't make this harder than it needs to be. Let's just go inside and look around. You might actually like it here." That's when I noticed it. When he popped the trunk, there was my old brown suitcase, packed and ready. My hands started shaking. "You already packed my things?" "I just brought a few essentials to get you started. We can bring more later." The word "later" hit me like a slap. This wasn't a visit or a tour. This was permanent. My own son had planned this entire thing without telling me, had let me believe we were going to celebrate my birthday when really he was dropping me off like an unwanted pet. Inside the building, everything smelled like disinfectant trying to mask something unpleasant. The lobby was decorated in beige and burgundy, with fake plants and paintings of flowers that had never seen real sunlight. A cheerful woman behind the reception desk smiled at us like we were checking into a hotel instead of signing away my freedom. "You must be Mrs. Henderson," she said to me. "We've been expecting you. Ryan has told us so much about you." I looked at my son, this man I'd raised with my own hands, and realized I didn't know him at all. While I'd been sitting at home missing him, he'd been here filling out paperwork, making arrangements, deciding my future without asking what I wanted. The room they showed me was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a dresser, and a window that looked out onto a brick wall. There was a bathroom I'd have to share with a roommate, a closet barely big enough for a week's worth of clothes, and fluorescent lighting that made everything look sickly and gray. "The dining room serves 3 meals a day," the woman was saying. "We have bingo on Tuesdays, movie nights on Fridays, and a book club that meets every Thursday. There's always something to keep you busy." Keep me busy. Like I was a child who needed activities to prevent me from getting into trouble. I sat down on the edge of the bed, still wearing my coat, still clutching my purse. Everything felt surreal, like I was watching someone else's life fall apart. Ryan signed papers while I sat there in silence. Legal documents that gave him power over my finances, my medical decisions, my entire existence. I watched his hand move across the pages, signing my life away with the same pen I'd used to sign his permission slips for school field trips. "Mom, I know this is hard," he said when the paperwork was done. "But you'll be safe here. You'll have people to take care of you, friends your own age. It's for the best." "Who's best?" I asked quietly. He looked uncomfortable. "Everyone's. Lisa thinks it's the right move too. She worries about you being alone." Lisa, his wife who barely spoke to me at family gatherings, who always found reasons to cut our visits short. Of course she thought this was the right move. With me out of the picture, she'd have Ryan all to herself. After he left, I sat in that sterile room listening to the sounds of my new life. Somewhere down the hall, a television was playing game shows. A woman was crying softly in the room next door. Footsteps squeaked on the polished floors, and overhead, fluorescent lights hummed like angry insects. I tried calling Ryan that night from the phone in the common area, but my call went straight to voicemail. I tried again the next morning with the same result. When I asked the staff about getting my cell phone back, they told me Ryan had taken it for safekeeping. "Too confusing for someone in my condition," they said. My condition. As if being 65 was a disease that needed to be managed. My roommate was a woman named Eleanor who slept most of the day and spent her waking hours talking to people who weren't there. She'd sit by the window having entire conversations with her late husband, asking him why he never visited anymore. The staff treated this like it was normal, even sweet. But it terrified me. Was this my future? Would I end up like Eleanor, forgotten by the living and talking to ghosts? The days blurred together in a haze of scheduled meals, mandatory activities, and forced cheerfulness from the staff. They called me sweetie and dear like I was a child. They reminded me to take my medications, even though I'd been managing my own pills for decades. They asked if I needed help getting dressed, if I remembered to brush my teeth, if I knew what day it was. I started to understand that this place wasn't about keeping me safe. It was about keeping me quiet, keeping me out of the way, keeping me from being an inconvenience to the people who were supposed to love me. Ryan visited once during my first week, bringing flowers and small talk about the weather. He didn't ask how I was adjusting or if I was happy. He just talked about his job and Lisa's new promotion and how busy they'd been. "Are you eating well?" he asked, looking around the dining room where we sat surrounded by other families having the same awkward conversations. "The food is fine," I lied. "Good. That's good. The doctor says you're settling in nicely." "What doctor?" I hadn't seen any doctor except for the nurse who checked my blood pressure twice a week. But I didn't correct him. I was starting to learn that the truth didn't matter here. Only their version of reality counted. That night, lying in the narrow bed listening to Eleanor mumble to her invisible husband, I felt something die inside me. Not my spirit exactly, but something softer. The part of me that believed in unconditional love, that trusted people to do right by me just because they were family. That part was gone, replaced by something harder and colder. I thought about all the years I'd spent putting Ryan first. The overtime shifts I'd worked to pay for his college, the vacations I'd skipped to buy him a car, the nights I'd stayed up helping him with homework or listening to his problems. I thought about the Mother's Day cards he used to make by hand, telling me I was the best mom in the world. I wondered when exactly I'd stopped being the best and started being a burden. 3 weeks into my stay at Sunset Manor, I was sitting in the common room pretending to watch television when a new staff member walked in. Her name was Grace, and unlike the others, she looked at me like I was a real person instead of a problem to be managed. She was young, maybe 30, with kind eyes and a smile that reached all the way to those eyes. "You seem different from the other residents," she said during one of her shifts. More aware, more present. It was the first time anyone had acknowledged that I didn't belong there. I wanted to cry, but I'd already learned that crying got you labeled as emotionally unstable and earned you extra attention from the staff psychiatrist. "I don't know why I'm here," I admitted. "Sometimes families think they're doing the right thing," Grace said carefully. "But that doesn't always mean it is the right thing." She was taking a risk talking to me like this, and we both knew it. But something in her voice told me she understood what it felt like to be powerless, to have other people make decisions about your life without asking what you wanted. That conversation planted a seed in my mind. For the first time since Ryan had abandoned me here, I started to think about fighting back. I started to imagine what it would feel like to take control of my own story instead of letting other people write the ending for me. But I had no idea how much my story was about to change, or that the weapon I needed for my fight was about to fall into my hands in the most unexpected way possible. Grace became my lifeline in that place. She worked the evening shift 3 times a week, and during those quiet hours when most residents were asleep, she'd sit with me and actually listen. Not the way the other staff listened, with half their attention on their phones or the clock, but really listen like my words mattered. "You know," she said one evening as we sat in the dimly lit common room, "I've been working in elder care for 8 years, and I can usually tell within a week who needs to be here and who doesn't." "And what's your verdict on me?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "You're sharper than most people half your age. Your son either doesn't know you very well, or he has other reasons for wanting you here." Other reasons. Those words stuck with me long after Grace went home that night. What other reasons could Ryan have? I started thinking about our last few conversations before he brought me here, trying to remember if there were clues I'd missed. A week later, Grace came to work looking excited about something. She waited until we were alone before pulling a wrinkled lottery ticket from her pocket. "This belonged to Mr. Patterson," she said quietly. "He passed away yesterday, and when we were cleaning out his room, we found this tucked inside his Bible. It's from last month's drawing." I looked at the ticket, confused. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because Mr. Patterson used to say the universe owed him something for all the bad luck he'd had. Maybe he was right, just not in the way he expected." She pressed the ticket into my hand. "What's the worst that could happen? You find out it's worthless and throw it away." I stared at the numbers on that small piece of paper. 7, 14, 23, 31, 42, and 15. They meant nothing to me, just random digits that some machine had spit out. But Grace was right about one thing. I had nothing to lose. That night, I waited until Eleanor was snoring softly before sneaking out to the computer in the activity room. The facility had 3 ancient desktop computers that residents could use for an hour at a time, supposedly to stay connected with family. I'd never touched one before, but desperation makes you learn quickly. It took me 20 minutes to figure out how to get to the lottery website. My hands were shaking as I typed in the numbers from Mr. Patterson's ticket. The screen loaded slowly, and for a moment I thought the computer had frozen. Then the page appeared, and I had to read it 3 times before the words sank in. "Congratulations. You have a winning ticket worth $22 million. I stared at that number until my eyes watered. $22 million. The room started spinning, and I had to grip the edge of the desk to keep from falling off the chair. I looked around to make sure no one had seen me, then quickly closed the browser and deleted the history like Grace had taught me. I stumbled back to my room in a daze, clutching that lottery ticket like it was made of gold. Eleanor was still sleeping, muttering something about her husband bringing her flowers. I sat on my bed in the dark, my mind racing with possibilities and fears in equal measure. $22 million. Enough money to buy my freedom, to disappear completely, to start over anywhere I wanted. But also enough money to make me a target if the wrong people found out. And if Ryan learned about it, I couldn't even imagine what he might do. The next morning, I asked Grace if she knew any lawyers. She looked surprised but didn't ask questions. "My cousin Marcus is a lawyer," she said. "He does a lot of pro bono work for seniors." "Why?" "I need some advice about something. Something private." Grace studied my face for a long moment. I'll give you his number. But Hannah, whatever you're thinking about doing, be careful. Some people don't like it when powerless people suddenly find their voice. Marcus Rivera turned out to be exactly what I needed. Young enough to understand technology, experienced enough to handle complex legal matters, and honest enough to tell me the truth, even when it wasn't what I wanted to hear. We met in a coffee shop 20 minutes away from Sunset Manor. Grace had driven me there during her lunch break, telling the staff I had a medical appointment. $22 million, Marcus repeated after I'd explained everything. He was a small man with intelligent eyes and the kind of calm demeanor that made you trust him immediately. And your son doesn't know about this? Nobody knows except Grace and now you. I need to understand my options before I make any decisions. Marcus leaned back in his chair, thinking. First, we need to verify the ticket and claim the prize. But we can do that through a trust, which means your name won't be publicly associated with the win. Second, we need to figure out exactly what legal authority your son has over your finances. The answer to that question turned out to be more complicated than I'd hoped. Ryan had somehow gotten himself named as my power of attorney, which gave him control over my bank accounts and financial decisions. But Marcus found loopholes, ways to establish new accounts and trusts that Ryan couldn't touch. The key is acting quickly and quietly, Marcus explained. Once we have the money secured in an irrevocable trust, there's nothing he can do to access it. But if he finds out before we finish the paperwork, he'll try to stop me, at the very least. And given that he's already demonstrated a willingness to override your wishes about where you live, I'd expect him to become very aggressive very quickly. Over the next 2 weeks, Marcus and I worked in secret to claim the lottery prize and establish a complex web of trusts and accounts. Grace covered for me when I needed to leave the facility, telling the staff I was attending physical therapy sessions at a nearby clinic. The money was paid out in a lump sum after taxes, about $13 million that suddenly made me one of the wealthiest people in Ohio. But wealth, I was learning, came with its own set of problems. I couldn't access the money without raising suspicions. I couldn't leave Sunset Manor without Ryan's permission. And I couldn't even make phone calls without supervision. I was a millionaire trapped in a prison of my son's making. It was during this time that I started paying closer attention to the financial documents Ryan had filed to get me committed. Marcus had requested copies as part of our legal strategy, and what I found in those papers made my blood run cold. There were debts listed under my name that I'd never heard of. Credit cards I'd never opened, loans I'd never taken, medical bills from doctors I'd never seen. According to the paperwork Ryan had submitted to the court, I was drowning in debt and clearly unable to manage my own affairs. This is fraud, Marcus said when I showed him the documents. He's been using your identity to take out loans and credit cards. Some of these debts go back 5 years. 5 years. I thought about all the times Ryan had asked to borrow money, always with some urgent excuse. His car had broken down, Lisa needed surgery, they were behind on their mortgage. I'd given him thousands of dollars over the years, money I'd saved from my pension and Social Security. Money he'd never paid back because he was too busy stealing more. There's something else, Marcus said, pulling out another folder. I did some research on your son's financial situation. He's been running a small construction business that's been bleeding money for 3 years. He's got creditors coming after him, and his house is in foreclosure. The picture was becoming clearer. Ryan hadn't put me in Sunset Manor out of concern for my safety. He'd done it to get control of my assets so he could use them to save his failing business. And if he succeeded in having me declared mentally incompetent, he could sell my house, access my pension, and spend every penny I had without anyone questioning his decisions. But what Ryan didn't know was that I wasn't the helpless old woman he thought I was. I was a woman with $13 million, a sharp lawyer, and a growing desire for revenge. I want to disappear, I told Marcus during one of our secret meetings. I want to vanish completely and let him wonder what happened to me. Marcus looked concerned. Hannah, I understand you're angry, but running away might not be the best solution. If you disappear, he could have you declared dead and still get access to your original assets. Then what do you suggest? We fight back. We expose what he's done and make sure he faces consequences for it. But that means going public, filing charges, taking him to court. It won't be easy. I thought about Ryan's face the day he'd dropped me off here, the way he'd avoided looking at me directly, the practiced way he'd lied to the staff about my condition. I thought about all the nights I'd spent wondering what I'd done wrong, what I could have done differently to keep my son's love. He stole more than money from me, I said finally. He stole my freedom, my dignity, my peace of mind. He made me doubt my own sanity. If I don't fight back, he'll do this to someone else's mother. Marcus nodded. Then we need to be smart about this. We need evidence, documentation, witnesses. And we need to be prepared for him to fight dirty. Over the next month, I became a detective in my own life. With Marcus's help, I requested financial records going back 10 years. I gathered every document Ryan had ever asked me to sign, every loan application, every medical form. What we found was a pattern of systematic theft and manipulation that had been going on for much longer than I'd realized. Ryan had been forging my signature on documents for years. He'd taken out loans using my house as collateral, opened credit cards in my name, and even filed fake insurance claims saying I'd been in accidents that never happened. The man I'd raised had been stealing from me since before his father died, using my trust and love as weapons against me. But the most devastating discovery came when Marcus found records showing that Ryan had been planning to put me in a nursing home for over a year. He'd visited Sunset Manor multiple times, filled out admission paperwork, and even put down a deposit, all while pretending to be the concerned son who worried about my living alone. This wasn't a sudden decision, Marcus explained. This was a calculated plan to remove you from your home so he could have unrestricted access to your assets. I sat in that coffee shop, staring at the evidence of my son's betrayal, and felt something fundamental shift inside me. The last traces of maternal protection, the instinct to make excuses for him or find reasons to forgive him, died completely. In their place grew something harder and more determined. I want him to pay for this, I said. Not just financially. I want him to face consequences for what he's done. Marcus pulled out a thick folder. Then you're going to like what I've prepared. We're going to file criminal charges for fraud, identity theft, and elder abuse. We're going to petition the court to reverse the power of attorney he obtained under false pretenses. And we're going to make sure every penny he stole gets paid back with interest. What about Sunset Manor? How do I get out of here? That's the easy part. Once we prove that your commitment was based on fraudulent information, the facility will have no choice but to release you. But Hannah, once we start this process, there's no going back. Your son will know that you're not the confused old woman he thought you were. He's going to fight back, and he's going to be desperate. I thought about Grace, who had risked her job to help me. I thought about Eleanor, talking to ghosts because the living had abandoned her. I thought about all the other residents at Sunset Manor who had been discarded by their families and forgotten by the world. Let him fight, I said. I'm not running anymore. But as we prepared to file the paperwork that would turn my quiet investigation into an open war, I had no idea how vicious that fight was about to become, or how far Ryan would go to silence me permanently. The first shot in our war came in the form of a phone call that Grace wasn't supposed to let me take. Ryan had been calling the facility every few days, asking about my condition and whether I was adjusting properly. But this time, he asked to speak to me directly. Mom, his voice sounded strained, almost frantic. How are you feeling? The staff says you've been asking a lot of questions lately. My pulse quickened. Someone had been watching me more closely than I'd realized. I'm fine, Ryan. Just trying to understand my situation better. Your situation is that you're safe and being taken care of. That's all you need to understand. His tone had an edge I'd never heard before. The doctor thinks you might be getting confused again. Maybe we should adjust your medications. Medications. I wasn't taking any medications except for a daily vitamin, but the threat was clear. If I kept asking questions, if I kept causing problems, they'd find ways to make me more compliant. I understand, I said carefully. Good. I'll visit this weekend. We need to talk about some financial matters. After he hung up, I found Grace and told her everything. Her face went pale as I described the conversation. Hannah, you need to be very careful. If they decide you're becoming a problem, they can legally sedate you. I've seen it happen to other residents who caused trouble. That night, I barely slept. Every sound in the hallway made me jump. Every footstep outside my door made me wonder if they were coming to drug me into submission. I realized that Ryan wasn't just stealing my money. He was planning to steal my mind. The next morning, Marcus called with urgent news. We need to move faster than planned. I just received a copy of a petition your son filed yesterday. He He's asking the court to have you declared mentally incompetent and to grant him permanent guardianship over all your affairs. What does that mean? It means if he wins, you'll have no legal rights at all. He'll control every aspect of your life, and there will be nothing you can do to stop him. The hearing was scheduled for the following Friday. 6 days to prepare for a battle that would determine whether I remained a free person or became Ryan's legal prisoner for the rest of my life. Marcus worked around the clock to prepare our defense. We gathered medical records proving I was mentally sound, financial documents showing Ryan's fraud, and witness statements from Grace and other staff members who could testify to my competence. But Ryan had advantages too. He'd been planning this for months, and he had resources I didn't know about. When Friday arrived, I sat in that courtroom wearing the same blue dress I'd worn on my birthday, the day this nightmare began. Ryan was there with his lawyer, an expensive-looking man in a $1,000 suit who kept checking his watch like he had more important places to be. Ryan wouldn't look at me directly, but I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands fidgeted with his tie. He was nervous, which meant he wasn't as confident about winning as he wanted everyone to believe. The judge was an older woman named Patricia Coleman, who had a reputation for being thorough and fair. She listened carefully as Ryan's lawyer presented his case, painting me as a confused elderly woman who was a danger to herself and others. "Your Honor," the lawyer said, "Mrs. Henderson has exhibited increasingly erratic behavior over the past year. She's forgotten to pay bills, left appliances running, and on several occasions has called her son in the middle of the night claiming that strangers were in her house." I wanted to scream that none of that was true, but Marcus had coached me to stay calm and let him handle the objections. "Furthermore," the lawyer continued, "Mrs. Henderson recently disappeared from Sunset Manor for several hours without informing staff of her whereabouts. When questioned about her absence, she became agitated and refused to explain where she had been. That was my coffee shop meetings with Marcus, twisted to sound like the confused wanderings of a dementia patient. When it was our turn, Marcus stood up with quiet confidence. "Your Honor, I'd like to present evidence that will show this petition is not about protecting Mrs. Henderson, but about concealing Mr. Taylor's systematic theft of her assets." The courtroom went silent. Ryan's lawyer shot to his feet, objecting loudly, but Judge Coleman held up her hand for silence. "I'll allow it. Proceed, Mr. Rivera." Marcus methodically presented every fraudulent document, every forged signature, every fake loan that Ryan had created using my identity. He showed bank records proving that Ryan had stolen over $200,000 from me over the past 5 years. He presented evidence that Ryan's business was failing and that he was facing bankruptcy. "Your Honor," Marcus said, "Mr. Taylor doesn't want guardianship to protect his mother. He wants it to prevent her from pressing criminal charges against him for fraud and elder abuse." Ryan's face had gone white. He whispered urgently to his lawyer, who looked increasingly uncomfortable as Marcus continued his presentation. The turning point came when Grace took the stand. She testified that I was one of the most mentally alert residents she'd ever worked with, that I managed my own daily activities without assistance, and that I'd never shown any signs of confusion or dementia. "In my professional opinion," Grace said, looking directly at the judge, "Mrs. Henderson doesn't belong in a care facility at all. She's perfectly capable of living independently." Ryan's lawyer tried to discredit Grace, suggesting she was too young and inexperienced to make such judgments. But Judge Coleman seemed impressed by Grace's calm, professional demeanor and detailed knowledge of geriatric care. Finally, it was my turn to testify. I walked to the witness stand on steady legs, looking directly at Ryan for the first time since this ordeal began. He finally met my eyes, and what I saw there wasn't love or concern. It was fear. "Mrs. Henderson," Marcus said gently, "can you tell the court why you believe your son filed this petition?" I took a deep breath and told my story. Not the sanitized version Ryan wanted people to hear, but the truth. I talked about waking up on my birthday expecting celebration and getting abandonment instead. I described the pre-packed suitcase, the forged documents, the systematic theft of my identity and assets. "My son didn't put me in that facility because I was confused," I said, my voice growing stronger with each word. "He put me there because I was becoming inconvenient, because he needed access to my money to save his failing business, and he couldn't get it as long as I was free to ask questions." "Do you believe you need a guardian, Mrs. Henderson?" "No, Your Honor. I believe I need protection from the person who's supposed to be protecting me." When Ryan took the stand, his performance was masterful. He played the role of the grieving son perfectly, talking about how painful it was to watch his mother's mental decline, how guilty he felt about having to make difficult decisions for her own good. But Marcus was ready for him. He produced documents showing that Ryan had been planning my commitment for over a year, long before any supposed signs of mental decline. He showed evidence that Ryan had lied to Sunset Manor about my condition to ensure my admission. "Mr. Taylor," Marcus said, "you've testified that you were concerned about your mother's ability to manage her finances. Can you explain why you took out a $50,000 loan in her name without her knowledge just 2 months before having her committed?" Ryan stammered, claiming he'd had my permission, that I'd forgotten giving it due to my condition. But when Marcus produced a recording of the bank call where Ryan had forged my verbal consent, Ryan's story fell apart completely. Judge Coleman called a recess to review all the evidence. During that hour-long break, I sat in the hallway watching Ryan pace back and forth, his lawyer speaking to him in urgent whispers. Several times, Ryan looked in my direction with an expression I'd never seen before, pure hatred. When court reconvened, Judge Coleman's decision was swift and decisive. Based on the evidence presented, I find no medical or legal basis for declaring Mrs. Henderson mentally incompetent. The petition for guardianship is denied. She paused, looking directly at Ryan. Furthermore, I am ordering an investigation into the financial irregularities brought to light during these proceedings. Ryan's world crumbled in that moment. His lawyer gathered papers quickly, muttering about appeals, but I could see the defeat in Ryan's posture. Judge Coleman wasn't finished. "Mrs. Henderson, you are free to leave Sunset Manor immediately if you choose. The power of attorney agreements signed under fraudulent pretenses are hereby voided." As I walked out of that courtroom, I felt lighter than I had in months. But I also knew this was just the beginning. Ryan had lost this battle, but a man desperate enough to commit fraud and elder abuse wasn't going to give up easily. That evening, back in my own house for the first time in 2 months, I sat at my kitchen table with Marcus, planning our next move. The criminal charges against Ryan would take months to process. In the meantime, I needed to protect myself from whatever desperate measures he might take. "He's going to be angry," Marcus warned. "Men like your son don't handle public humiliation well. You should consider staying somewhere else for a while." But I was done running, done hiding, done letting Ryan control my life through fear. "This is my house," I said. "I'm not leaving again." 3 days later, my decision to stay put proved to be either very brave or very foolish. I was awakened at 2 a.m. by the sound of someone trying to break into my back door. Through the kitchen window, I could see a figure in dark clothing working at the lock with some kind of tool. My heart hammered as I reached for the phone to call 911, but the line was dead. Someone had cut the phone line. I crept upstairs to my bedroom and locked the door, grabbing the baseball bat I'd started keeping by my bed. Outside, I could hear footsteps on the back porch, then the sound of the door opening. Someone was in my house, and I had a terrible feeling I knew exactly who it was. The footsteps moved slowly through my kitchen, deliberately quiet, but not quiet enough. I pressed my ear against the bedroom door, gripping that baseball bat so tightly my knuckles ached. Whoever was down there knew the layout of my house, knew which floorboards creaked and how to avoid them. That narrowed it down to someone who had spent time here, someone familiar. The steps paused at the bottom of the staircase. In that silence, I could hear my own heartbeat thundering in my ears. Then, slowly, the footsteps began climbing toward my bedroom. I had 2 choices: hide and hope they'd leave, or confront whoever was coming for me. But hiding felt like surrender, and I was done surrendering. I positioned myself beside the door, bat raised, and waited. "Mom." Ryan's voice came through the door, soft and careful. "Mom, I know you're awake. We need to talk. Get out of my house, Ryan." My voice was steadier than I felt. "I can't do that. Not until we settle this." He tried the door handle, found it locked. "Open the door, Mom. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." The irony of those words, the same ones he'd used at Sunset Manor, wasn't lost on me. "I'm calling the police." "No, you're not." I made sure of that. His voice had changed, become colder. This wasn't the Ryan who had charmed judges and juries. This was someone I'd never met before. "The phone lines are cut, and I know you don't have a cell phone. Grace told me you've been asking about getting one." Grace. My heart sank. Had she betrayed me, or had Ryan threatened her somehow? "What do you want, Ryan?" "I want you to stop this nonsense. Drop the charges, Sign over power of attorney voluntarily, and go back to Sunset Manor where you belong. Do that, and we can forget this whole mess ever happened." I almost laughed. "You think I'm going to reward you for breaking into my house?" Something heavy slammed against the door. Ryan was losing patience. "You don't understand what you're doing, Mom. You're destroying our family. Lisa left me because of this scandal. My business is ruined. I've lost everything because you couldn't just accept help when it was offered." "Help? You call stealing from me and locking me away help? I was protecting you." The words exploded out of him. "Do you have any idea how much money you were wasting? Donating to charities, buying things you didn't need, trusting people who were obviously scamming you. You would have lost everything if I hadn't stepped in. So you decided to steal it first?" Another slam against the door. The wood was starting to splinter around the lock. "I borrowed it. I was going to pay it back once my business turned around. But now, thanks to your lawyer, that's never going to happen." The lock gave way with a sharp crack. Ryan stood in my doorway, and for a moment, neither of us moved. He looked terrible, unshaven, hollow-eyed, wearing clothes that hadn't been washed in days. This wasn't the successful businessman who had dropped me off at Sunset Manor. This was a desperate man with nothing left to lose. "Put the bat down, Mom. Get out of my house. I'm trying to save us both here. You think you've won, but you haven't thought this through. When the criminal charges go public, everyone will know our business. Every detail of our family finances will be in the newspapers. Is that really what you want?" "I want justice." "Justice?" Ryan laughed bitterly. "You want revenge. You're angry that I made decisions you didn't like, so you're trying to destroy my life. You destroyed your own life when you decided to steal from me. I'm your son. Everything you have should come to me anyway when you die. I just accessed it a little early." The casual way he talked about my death, like it was just another business transaction, chilled me to the bone. "Get out, Ryan. Last warning." Instead of leaving, he stepped into the room. "I found something interesting when I was going through your financial records for the court case. There's money missing, Mom. A lot of money. Money that didn't exist 6 months ago." My blood turned to ice. He knew about the lottery. Where did it come from? His voice was soft now, dangerously quiet. "What aren't you telling me? I don't know what you're talking about. Don't lie to me. I know you've been meeting with that lawyer, plotting behind my back. Where did you get $13 million? The number hit me like a physical blow. He knew everything. Somehow, despite all of Marcus's precautions, Ryan had found out about the lottery money. "That money is mine," I said. "No, Mom. That money is ours. Family money. And I'm not going to let you waste it out of spite." He pulled something from his jacket pocket, a syringe filled with clear liquid. "This will help you sleep. When you wake up, you'll be back at Sunset Manor, and we'll work out a new arrangement. One that benefits both of us." I gripped the bat tighter. "What's in that syringe?" "Just something to keep you calm during the transition. The doctor says it's perfectly safe for someone your age." "What doctor?" "Dr. Harrison. He's very understanding about difficult family situations. He's already prepared the paperwork to have you readmitted to Sunset Manor under psychiatric hold." The pieces clicked together. Ryan had found a corrupt doctor willing to help him regain control over me. Once I was sedated and back in the facility, he could have me declared mentally incompetent again, this time with medical backing. "You're going to drug me and kidnap me? I'm going to save you from making decisions you'll regret." He took another step closer. "Put down the bat, Mom. Don't make me hurt you." That's when I realized Ryan wasn't just desperate. He was dangerous. The sun I'd raised was gone, replaced by someone who saw me as nothing more than an obstacle to money he felt entitled to. "You know what the saddest part is?" I said, keeping the bat between us. "I would have given you anything if you'd just asked. If you'd told me you were in trouble, if you'd been honest about needing help, I would have found a way. It's too late for that now." "Yes, it is." I swung the bat with every ounce of strength I had. Ryan dodged, but not fast enough. The bat caught him in the shoulder, sending him stumbling backward. The syringe flew from his hand and shattered against the wall. "You crazy old woman," he snarled, lunging for me. But I was ready. Months of suppressed rage gave me strength I didn't know I still had. I swung again, this time catching him across the ribs. He went down hard, gasping for breath. "Stay down," I warned, raising the bat again. Instead, he rolled toward the nightstand where I kept an old letter opener. My father's army training had taught me to recognize when someone was reaching for a weapon. I brought the bat down on his wrist before he could grab it. Ryan screamed, clutching his injured hand to his chest. You broke my wrist. Good. Now get out of my house before I break something else. He struggled to his feet, his face twisted with pain and fury. This isn't over, Mom. I'll find another way. That money should be mine. The only thing that's going to be yours is a prison cell. After he left, I sat on my bed shaking for almost an hour before I trusted my legs to carry me downstairs. I found my spare cell phone, the one Marcus had insisted I buy and hide, and called 911. The police arrived within minutes, followed by an ambulance and Marcus, who had somehow heard about the incident on his police scanner. They found Ryan at the emergency room getting his wrist treated and arrested him there. The attempted kidnapping charge, combined with the existing fraud evidence, destroyed any remaining sympathy Ryan might have had in the court of public opinion. The story made national news. Son attempts to drug and kidnap lottery-winning mother. Yes, the lottery secret was out. But instead of making me a target, it made me a symbol. Suddenly, I was receiving letters from elderly people all over the country who had similar stories of family betrayal and financial abuse. Support groups invited me to speak. Advocacy organizations asked for my help. Marcus helped me establish the Hannah Henderson Foundation for Elder Protection, funded by half of my lottery winnings. We created legal aid clinics, published guides on recognizing financial abuse, and lobbied for stronger laws protecting seniors from exploitation. Ryan was sentenced to 8 years in prison for fraud, identity theft, elder abuse, and attempted kidnapping. He tried to contact me several times from jail, but I returned every letter unopened. Some bridges, once burned, can never be rebuilt. The hardest part wasn't losing Ryan. It was accepting that the Ryan I'd loved had probably never existed at all. The real Ryan was the man who saw his aging mother as a source of income rather than a person deserving of love and respect. But out of that loss came something unexpected: freedom. Real freedom, not just from Ryan's control, but from the need to please people who would never be satisfied. I learned to say no without guilt, to trust my own judgment, to value my own opinion above others' expectations. I never went back to Sunset Manor as a resident, but I visited often as a volunteer and advocate. Grace and I became close friends, and I helped fund her nursing school education. She's a registered nurse now, running her own practice that specializes in elder care advocacy. Eleanor, my former roommate, passed away quietly in her sleep 6 months after I left. She died still talking to her husband's ghost, still waiting for visitors who never came. I made sure she had a proper funeral, attended by people who remembered her as more than just a forgotten old woman. On my 68th birthday, 3 years after that terrible day when Ryan first abandoned me, I threw myself a party. Not a sad, solitary affair, but a real celebration with friends, cake, and laughter. Grace was there, along with Marcus and his family, several people I'd met through my foundation work, and even some former Sunset Manor residents who had found their own paths to freedom. As I blew out the candles on my cake, I made a wish. Not for the return of the son I'd lost, but for the continued strength to help other people find their voices when family tries to silence them. The foundation has helped over 3,000 seniors escape abusive situations. We've recovered millions of dollars in stolen assets, prosecuted hundreds of financial predators, and changed laws in 12 states. But the work that matters most to me is the simple act of listening to people who have been told their voices don't matter. Because the truth is, everyone's voice matters. Everyone deserves dignity, respect, and the right to control their own life, regardless of age. And sometimes, just sometimes, the universe gives you the tools you need to fight back, even if those tools come disguised as an old lottery ticket tucked inside a dead man's Bible. I still live in my own house, still make my own decisions, still fight my own battles. I have enough money to last several lifetimes, but what I treasure most isn't the financial security. It's the knowledge that I saved myself when no one else would. And if you're listening to this story while dealing with your own family betrayal, while feeling trapped or silenced or dismissed, remember this. You are stronger than you know, smarter than they think, and more valuable than anyone who tries to diminish you deserves to understand. Your voice matters. Use it.